In 1975, Ugandan soldiers served their president a dish called special meat. When UN inspectors tested it, the DNA matched missing schoolchildren. Idi Amin ruled Uganda like a storm that never broke. By the mid-70s, his mind had unraveled, twisted by power and whispers from shadowed corners. He trusted no one, ministers, generals, even his own wives. Paranoia gnawed at him, and he turned to witch doctors, men with eyes like polished obsidian, who promised immortality. Their words were seductive: consume the flesh of the pure, the untainted, the virgins, and death would never touch him. Amin, a man who laughed at fear, believed them. He demanded rituals, offerings. His palace kitchens, once fragrant with cardamom and roasted goat, began to carry a heavier scent, thick, metallic, like blood pooling in a slaughterhouse. Soldiers spoke in low tones about what went into the president's meals. They called it special meat, a dish prepared only for him, served on gold-rimmed plates under the flicker of chandeliers. Villages near Entebbe's military barracks began to notice gaps in their schools. Children, bright-eyed boys and girls, no older than 12, stopped coming home. Parents searched, their cries swallowed by the humid night air. Headmasters reported absences to local police, but the officers, pale with fear, refused to investigate. The barracks loomed too close, a fortress of concrete and barbed wire where soldiers moved like ghosts. Whispers spread among the villagers: the president's men were taking the children. A cook from the palace, a wiry man with trembling hands, let slip a phrase at a roadside bar: blood stew. He said it under his breath, his eyes darting to the shadows. The next day, he was gone. His wife found only his shoes, neatly placed by their doorstep, laces tied. The UN had been watching Amin for years. His purges, his massacres, his defiance of the world stage, they couldn't ignore him any longer. In late 1975, inspectors arrived in Kampala, their briefcases heavy with suspicion. They demanded access to the palace, to the kitchens, to the freezers. Amin greeted them with a wide smile, his voice booming with charm, but his eyes were cold, like a predator sizing up prey. The inspectors collected samples: a slab of meat from a stew, still warm, its broth dark and viscous, a jar labeled beef that smelled wrong, too sweet, too human. They sent the samples to a lab in Geneva, expecting nothing more than another dictator's excess. The results came back on a quiet Tuesday morning. The lab technician, a veteran of war crime investigations, stared at the report until his hands shook. The meat wasn't beef. It was human. Worse, it wasn't one person. The stew sample contained DNA from 42 children, their genetic markers tangled in a grotesque mosaic. The room fell silent. One inspector vomited into a waste bin. Another, a devout Catholic, crossed herself and whispered a prayer she hadn't spoken since childhood. The palace held darker secrets still. A raid uncovered a locked drawer in Amin's desk, its wood polished to a mirror shine. Inside was a ledger, handwritten in a clerk's precise script. It listed names, 200 of them. Children from schools in Entebbe, Jinja, Kampala. Ages 6 to 12. Dates of disappearance, scrawled in red ink, alongside weights and measurements, like livestock at a market. The final column was labeled "Delivered." The inspectors read the names aloud, their voices breaking. Sarah Okello, age 9. David Mutebai, age 7. Esther Namaganda, age 11. Each name a wound, each entry a confirmation of the unthinkable. The ledger ended with a single, chilling note: more required for His Excellency's strength. A chef who survived the regime spoke years later, his voice hollowed by guilt. He'd worked in the palace kitchens, a place where the air was thick with steam and the cloying smell of boiling meat. He described Amin's favorite dish, the special meat, served with yams and a side of groundnut sauce. The president would eat slowly, savoring each bite, his laughter filling the dining hall. Once, the chef had muttered that the meat was pork, a lie to cover his fear. Amin paused, his fork mid-air, and grinned. "Pork," he said. "No, no. This is sweeter. Much sweeter." The chef never spoke of it again, not until he fled the country, his dreams haunted by the crunch of bone fragments under the pestle, the way they dissolved into the stew. But the worst detail was found not in the meat, not in the ledger, but in the palace freezer logs. Pages of meticulous records, kept by a loyal quartermaster, detailed every delivery to the kitchen. Entries read like a butcher's inventory: 10 units, fresh, cleaned, ready for preparation. The logs noted teeth, hundreds of small, milk-white teeth, extracted and stored separately, as if they were evidence to be hidden. A bodyguard, now an old man on his deathbed, confessed to pulling them. His hands shook as he spoke, his voice barely a whisper. "The teeth," he said. "We had to pull all the little teeth out first. They got stuck in his throat otherwise." He died before he could say more, his last breath rattling like a plea for forgiveness. The UN findings shattered the silence around Amin's atrocities. The world recoiled, but Uganda was already a land of fear, where truth was buried under the weight of his rule. The inspectors left, their reports filed in sterile offices, but the children's names lingered, etched into the memories of those who read them. One document, overlooked at first, surfaced in the chaos: a diary, hidden in a schoolteacher's satchel, recovered from a ditch outside Entebbe. Its pages were stained, the ink smudged by rain, but the words were clear. A girl, no older than 10, had written, "Teacher said we're going to meet the president. Why do the soldiers have ropes?" The entry ended abruptly, the pen trailing off into a jagged line, as if she'd been interrupted. Amin's reign crumbled by 1979, his empire of terror collapsing under the weight of rebellion and invasion. Exiled to Saudi Arabia, he lived in a gilded cage, far from the jungles and barracks of Uganda. But the man who once commanded fear was no longer whole. Dementia clawed at his mind, stripping away the bravado. He spoke of ghosts, hungry ones, their voices small and accusing. At night, in his Jeddah villa, he woke screaming, clawing at the air, swearing he heard children singing in Luganda, soft, lilting songs from the villages he'd bled dry. The melodies drifted through his dreams, growing louder, closer, until he could smell the earth of their graves. Nurses reported him weeping, begging the shadows to leave him be. In his final days, Amin barely ate. Food was brought to him: lamb, rice, dates, but he pushed it away, his eyes wide with terror. The smell, he said, was wrong. It reminded him of the palace kitchens, of steaming pots and the sweet, heavy scent that clung to his clothes. He died in 2003, alone, his body wasted, his mind a prison of memories he could not escape. The nurses said his last words were incoherent, a babble of apologies and curses, but one phrase stood out: "They're still hungry." The palace in Kampala is quiet now, its halls empty, the kitchens long since scrubbed clean. But villagers near Entebbe swear they hear things at night: soft footsteps, the clink of metal pots, the faint hum of a child's song carried on the wind. The ledger, the diary, the freezer logs, they sit in archives, locked away, their pages yellowing but their weight undiminished. Uganda has moved on, its people resilient, but the scars remain. The special meat is never spoken of, not directly. It lives in the silences, in the glances exchanged when someone passes the old barracks, in the way parents hold their children a little closer when the sun sets.